Hello everyone, welcome to Cyber Platter. Today we'll discuss about GDPR. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. It was came into effect on May 25, 2018 and is probably the most powerful data privacy law in the world. GDPR is a successor to the 1995 EU Data Protection Directive because there has been a lot of changes happened in the technology and how the organizations process the data or share the data. EU decided that they need to have a new approach for personal data privacy. That's the reason GDPR came into the picture. GDPR is created to protect data of EU citizens and residents. GDPR applies to the organizations that are in the EU. Even if these organizations store the data outside EU, GDPR still applies. It also applies to the organizations that are outside EU when these organizations offer goods or some kind of services to the EU people, or if these organizations use web tools to monitor the behavior of the EU citizens and residents. It applies. You might have seen like Google shows you suggestions based on your previous activities. That's one kind of monitoring. GDPR imposes obligations on the companies anywhere in the world. The companies which are non-compliant have to pay huge fines. The fines could be up to 4% of their global revenue or £20 million, whichever is higher. Also, the people who are affected could seek compensations from these organizations. For better understanding of GDPR, we need to know few terms. Personal data or PII. PII is any information that is related to an individual and can be used to identify the person. Data processing. Data processing means any action that can be performed on the data, such as collecting, storing, using, deleting, etc. Data subject. Data subject is the person whose data is processed. Data controller. Data controller is the person who decides how the data can be processed. If you work for an organization and you decide how the data is processed in your organization, then the data controller could be you. Data processor. Data processor is any third-party entity who processes the data on behalf of data controller. Some organizations might outsource certain functionalities like hiring, payroll processing, etc. In those situations, the third-party company is data processor. Data protection officer. Under certain conditions, organizations required to appoint a data protection officer, and the data protection officer ensures that the organization is compliant with GDPR. Let's take a little deeper look into PII. PII stands for Personal Identifiable Information. It sometimes referred as personal data or personal information. PII is any information related to a person or data subject. It can be used to identify a person. PII could contain direct or indirect identifiers. Direct identifiers are like name, social security number, which are unique to that person. Indirect identifiers are like race, color, age. By combining multiple indirect identifier, you could identify a person. Here are some examples of PII. You might have seen this message when you visit some websites. These websites ask you to accept their cookie policy. This is started with GDPR. Because websites uses some cookies to store user details for tracking purpose, and these details could be PII. That's why the websites must get an explicit consent from the user. There are few exceptions to GDPR. GDPR only applies to the organizations that are engaged in professional or commercial activity. If you are collecting email addresses and other details for a private party that you are organizing, that data collection doesn't come under GDPR. Also, the organizations that are small to medium size, means less than 250 employees, must still comply with GDPR, but they don't need to keep a record of the data processing. Data protection principles. Anyone who processes the data, they must do according to the 7 principles of GDPR. The first one is lawfulness. Lawfulness means data processing must be lawful and transparent to the data subject. Purpose limitation. Purpose limitation means data controller must process the data for the purpose explicitly specified to the data subject at the time of data collection. They should not use it for any other purposes. Data minimization. Data controller must collect and process data only as much as absolutely necessary for the purpose. They should not collect extra information that is not required. Accuracy. Data must be always accurate and up to date. Storage limitation. Data controllers must store the data only as long as necessary. Integrity and confidentiality. Data processing must be done in such a way as to ensure appropriate security, integrity, and confidentiality. Accountability. The data controller must be able to demonstrate GDPR compliance with all of these principles. Data security. The data controller must handle the data securely by implementing appropriate security controls, such as implementing multi-factor authentication to access the systems where data is stored or processed, and implement end-to-end encryption on the data, and limit the access to these systems where data is stored or processed. In case of a data breach, the organizations must inform data subjects within 72 hours of the breach. Otherwise, organizations could face penalties. Data processing is allowed when data subject provided the clear consent. For example, user opted in for newsletters or marketing emails. And processing is allowed when it is required to enter into a contract where data subject is a party. For example, you are leasing a property to the data subject and you need to run the background check on that person, then the processing is allowed. Or in case you want to comply with a legal obligation or save someone's life, or you have a legitimate interest, in these scenarios, you can process the data. GDPR gives certain rights to the data subjects. These rights are the right to be informed. Data controller need to inform the user about data collection. The right of access. Users have right to know about the data processing, such as purpose of processing, length of the time the data is stored, etc. The right to rectification. Users have a right to correct inaccurate or incomplete personal data. The right to erasure. Users have the right to request to delete any information about them that the data controller have. The right to restrict processing. Data subjects can request to temporarily change the way the data is processed if they believe the data is inaccurate or is being used illegally, or the data processing is no longer needed by the controller. The right to data portability. Data controller has to store users' personal data in a format that can be easily shared with others. The right to object. Data subjects have right to object processing of their personal data. Rights in relations to automated decision making and profiling means the data subject has has the right not to be subject to a decision based on solely on automated processing. This is a very high level overview of GDPR. The actual regulation itself is about 88 or 90 pages. We recommend you to consult your attorney or legal team for better understanding of GDPR and how it affects your organization. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please share and subscribe. Also leave a comment if you have any question or feedback.